Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and I have for you guys the latest changes from V3 that came in in the last week of December. So I'll talk about the changes, then we analyze them and the overall thoughts on them. Then we will go into the updated rotation because the changes do affect the rotation, one of it anyway. And I'll talk about the new number of spreads for the updated rotation. Notes and assumptions, updated figures after the buffs, Constellation Comparison, and a TLDR. Okay. So thankfully, this is not 14 sessions, this is only 8 sessions. It's almost like half of the previous video. Yeah. Alright, without further ado, let's dive right in to talk about the changes. So first off, the normal attack talent, basically it's nerfs all around. All of it is being nerfed. The actual impact on this, honestly speaking, isn't that big because NA talent is the lowest contributor amongst all his damage sources. So for a reference, right, a full Dendro M5 string was 45k with C0R1 signature weapon. Now with this nerf, it's 42k. It's, it's acceptable. I mean, it's manageable. It's not that bad. Okay. Now on to the good stuff. The E, or the projection attacks. So first off, rush attack damage got nerfed again, but very, very slightly. But more importantly, the projection attacks actually got buffed. I actually mentioned in the previous map guide 2 that I hope the projection attacks will get buffed. And it really did get buffed, so that's really good. In fact, the 3 mirror got a pretty big boost. It's actually the biggest winner here, because you get a 24% boost over the previous version. While 2 mirror also gets a buff, but it's a very, very small buff. It's just 3.6%, so not that noticeable. 1 mirror gets actually a bit nerf, but in the first place, you should not be triggering 1 mirror projection attacks. Okay. Now, E-rush damage, as I said, too minuscule to matter. So to conclude, right, so it's even better to go for 3 mirror now, which is what I've been advocating since the first map guide anyway, instead of like going for the Q quick sword build. It's doable, but it's not his ultimate play style. It's just that you have the option to do it. MiHoYo is trying, the HoYoverse is trying to be more, it's trying to give you something of a flexibility with regards to this. Now, moving on to the passive, the A4 passive, it has gone through so many changes, but basically, now every EM is 0.1% instead of 0.09 or even 0.12 from the very, very first version. Maximum damage increase has gone back to 100%. It went from 100 to 90 and then to 100. So damage bonus cap is back to 100%, so decent buff, but the problem is that the AEM required is still 1000. And in Math Guide 2 I already talked about how hard it is to achieve his 1000. If you are going for aggro spread comp, and if you are going for damage goblet and crit support, which you should, right? Now, next is the C1. C1 is very, very straightforward. Okay, the cooldown reduction is increased from 1 second to 1.2 seconds. Now, this change is reflected in the Chinese version, but not the English version yet. So it's just like the C2 change in 3.4 Beta V2, which now in the Beta V3 of English is updated to be 50 EM, which is why I'm not going to mention C2 here because I already talked about it in the previous math guide. Alright, so it's still QOL, but look at the caps here. Except the new C6 where you can actually make use of C1. Now do you see why they buffed the C1? Don't worry, I'll cover that in more detail later. Okay, C6, in fact I'm covering it now. So C6 actually adds a very interesting capability of change here, where you always generate 3 mirrors, regardless of the number of mirrors consumed. And in terms of the duration, got cut off, but basically the duration got reduced from 6 seconds to 5 seconds. So what this means is that when you have C6, you should use a E, followed by a 2 mirror Q, then you start all your C6 stuff. And in fact, between the E and Q, there are other stuff you can do, and I'll talk about that in the rotation. So basically, now your Q gets 8 ticks instead of 4 ticks, and also 3 spreads instead of 2 spreads. But in return, you lose E, for getting 8 seconds of 3 mirror. Right? You can get 8 seconds of 3 mirror. You basically get like 2 mirror plus 4 seconds of 3 mirror. Something like that. But like I said, remember the C1 buff? So C6 actually indirectly either buff or unlocks the value of C1. Because you will actually be able to use the E again as part of the C6 rotation. Thanks to the fact that the C6 skill always generates 3 mirrors, which then allows us to use E as the very first action, right? And if you use E as the very first action, you get along with the new buff of the C1, you are actually able to do the E again. So this is the C6 rotation where you actually can get to the E again. See here? The E starts at the very beginning of the rotation. And as you go through the rotation itself, eventually you'll be able to do E. So let's break down whether we can really use the second E in time. I'm gonna do like a time elapse and an E cooldown here for you guys. Alright. So time elapse here is 0.5 seconds, E cooldown at 1.7. Obviously it starts at 0, but I don't think I need to show the 0, right? So why is it 0.5 seconds? So it's very simple, because E rush actually triggers projections too. I realized this recently when I was doing a frame analysis, and essentially without doing normal attack and just doing the E, it will really proc the projection attack, despite the description of the talent. But I'll talk more about that later. But it's 0.5 seconds because of the way the 2 mirror animation works. It always starts from the behind or to the side of imagine your Alhaitham is here, okay? It always imagine your Alhaitham is here. It always starts from here. The 2 mirror effect. So it takes 0.5 seconds to hit someone that's in front of you, which is why I put it as such. Alright. Now the next we are going to do we are going to get a 2 mirror NA first prop. It's 1.6 not 0.5 seconds because remember the attack trigger at 0.0. 0.5 is just the time it takes for you to hit the front. Okay. Now technically speaking, N3, although there's 4 hits in there, I'm not 100% sure that it will be able to do so. I did see a gameplay video where E and N3 was able to trigger 3 projection attacks in total, but the guy did have a slight pause before he did his N3 combo. So I'm not sure whether that's like the animation of E itself having that little bit of lag, or was it slow usage. See? So this is one thing I need to test. May need a M4, but regardless of whether it's an N3 or M4, it doesn't change the time elapsed. Okay? You're still able to do a 0, 1.6, and 2.2 effectively. So there's 2 props here, basically. It's 2 mirror, it's not 3 mirror. And then you have like a 2-second Q animation, 2-second wait time for mirror generation, and you get 1 3 mirror prop from the CA, which is why there's an additional reduction as well. Okay? And you then move on to do the N5 here, which will give you the 2 3 mirror props. And if you look at this, it's very simple. 10.4 seconds have passed, your E cooldown is 70.6 seconds. So in other words, 11 seconds is sufficient, right? And it just so happens that you are actually able to hit this timing. You're really able to hit this timing. In fact, it's like E plus like almost 4. Okay, it gets 4 seconds plus 8 seconds plus another 4 seconds. Basically, that's the gist of it. You will be able to use your E again. In fact, it matches perfectly. By the time you're done with this, you are ready to your E just finished cooldown. If it was not buff, if it was a 1 second cooldown reduction, basically it's about 1.2 second extra wait time. Because you saw there's like 6 instances of this, right? So 6 instances of this means that it would have been 6 second cooldown reduction instead of 7.2 additional cooldown reduction. So it wouldn't match perfectly. So now it does. In case you're wondering why C1 got buff, it's for the sake of C6. It's not for C1 itself. Because for C1 itself, it's still useless for the 0 plus rotation. Okay? So with regards to whether or not you should use the second E, even though you can use, I'll talk more about it throughout the entire video. But I'll address a bit more on the rotation section. Okay? Now, on top of that, C6 actually also unlocks the value of C4. Right? Because if you're going to consume 2 mirrors on his C6 Q, now his C4 effect also generates 60 EM for the other party members for 15 seconds. Since EM buffs are dynamic, Nahida and Yae, who are both dealing off-field damage, gets their damage buff as well. And the same applies for all other EM skilling off-field character. Kole, DMC, Cookie, whoever it is, as long as they have some sort of EM skilling. Now, off-field is important here because Alhaitham is going to be on-field, right? But in the first place, the aggro spread is already designed. These two are of the off-field characters who do skill from EM. So the added nearby is more for co-op, where someone in Nazuma, for example, wouldn't get the C4 Alhaitham buff if Alhaitham is in Sumeru. And more importantly, I don't know why I didn't write this. And more importantly, to make it clear that your off-field characters can get that as well. Alright. Honestly, it's kind of ridiculous how good C6 is now. Because other than giving you 10 CR and 70 CD, it also allows you to get 4 more Q ticks plus 1 more spread on your Q. It actually allows utilization of C1 in your rotation itself, which means 1 more E. And that E is also going to give you 1 more projection attack plus 1 more spread from both the E and the projection attack. So it's adding a lot of damage effectively. And I'll show you guys later how it works in terms of the figures. The C6 also utilizes the C4 to provide EM buff to the team, even for on-field DPS role. Previously, if you didn't have C6, all the C4 does is give you something to buff the team with when you're doing Quick Sword. By the way, my complaint still remains the same. The EM buff is a little too low for C4 Constellation. But if you have a C6, now it becomes 60 EM to the entire team, while 30% Dendro bonus to himself, which actually makes this one of the higher C4 value actually. Because if I didn't remember, Yae C4 is only 20% electro damage. Yep. So I'll say his constellations are like may just be the most lopsided I've ever seen, with C6 taking a huge chunk out of the entire C0 to C6 value. Because his C1 wasn't that, it was pretty much useless. Okay, it's very QL, very situational. C6 now unlocks the C1 value. Projection damage is buff. Okay, so overall thoughts on the changes. Projection damage buff, Constellations buff although it's mainly C6 and C6 buffing C1 and C4 indirectly. So I'll say yes, the changes are good. It's as per what I was hoping / expecting in Math Guide 2, although it's a bit too lopsided on the C6 part. But on a side note, right, if the new C6 effect, the one where Q always generates 3 mirrors, if it was moved to something like C2 or C1, it'll probably be better. Right, because it makes it less lopsided. It gives you more value early on. It also gives you more value on the individual constellations. Take for example, okay, if the effect was added to C2, it means that your C2 will unlock your C1 value rather than having to go all the way to C6. And if it was and it also makes C4 as an individual constellation itself stronger without having to get C6. Likewise, if it was at say C1, then obviously C1 value is high. But if the awkward thing about it being in C1 is that it might be even higher value than C2. Yeah. So anyway, it's still not that ideal that it's C6. I mean, I'm okay with it being on a constellation, but it should be on the early constellations. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, constellations have always been a real game. So anyway, keep watching for the updated figures and constellation values here. Okay. Now, rotation wise, there's no change to this. This is the 18-second rotation I talked about in the Math Guide 2. And if you remember, I already said that this will be the rotation moving forward I'll talk about. Although when an Alhaitham is out, I'll probably experiment around with the other two rotations, total 3 rotations in the Math Guide 2. Now, since it's rotation, if you see here, the Alhaitham actions is pretty much the same as what I've covered when I was talking about, like, when I was doing the breakdown of whether the E can really be ready to be used in the rotation. So for that particular rotation, because you're using your E again, it is a 22-second rotation. So it is a longer rotation. As for the 18-second rotation, it's very straightforward. You just don't use the second E. That's it. Just ignore your C1 E. Simple as that. So let me cover the quick notes for these rotations, okay? So alternative rotation for C0 Plus refer to map guide 2. Like I said, there's two others. Now obviously this is TC, so the NA stream may change slightly upon release, but based on current gameplay, again, I am fairly confident the timing should match for the above. Okay? Honestly, the tricky thing is always getting the third mirror up after one expires ASAP. And make sure that you don't trigger a projection attack while it's two mirror. Yeah. So like I said, the CC rotation allocated accordingly. Yeah, I already talked about the alternative C6 rotation, right? And C6 getting nerfed to 5 seconds actually fits this 18-second rotation too. Because you're not getting a C6 effect until here. Yeah. Okay? At least the 10 CR and 70. So basically your C6 effect, the new effect, contributes pretty much his entire action window because it changes his entire action window, while the 10 CR 70 CD is more for the right after the Q. Or rather, right after the 3 meters generated from the Q. Now, obviously, the 22-second C6 rotation will have your Yae E's expired at the point of casting the second E. So effectively, the last 4 seconds will not have her E. Okay? But this should be straightforward, right? Now, Cookie's E and Nahida's E will last throughout, but obviously Nahida's E if your enemies did not die. Remember, you can reapply here, okay? Now, C1 Nahida Q will last for 22 seconds rotation, because it's 20 seconds, so at this point in time, definitely it's enough. But if you only have C0 Nahida, then unfortunately, it can't last for the 22 seconds, but it can last for the 16 seconds, the 18 seconds. For the 18 seconds, it's fine. Because it is about 15 seconds here from at the end of casting Nahida's Q. Okay? But in the first place, if you are getting C6 Alhaitham, you should have Nahida C1 or C2 at least. Now, for the last 4 seconds, in case it is not clear, right, you have to either choose to extend your C6 effect or choose to keep your 3 mirrors up. Because the way I understand it is that you get your C6 effect when you try to generate a mirror when your 3 mirrors are already up. I don't believe that will extend the 3 mirror duration. So if that is the case, you actually have to choose at the point of this E here. You should. There's two options. One, you extend your C6 effect. The other is to choose to keep the 3 mirrors up. And with the 3 mirrors reset being buffed in this V3, to be honest with you guys, 3 mirrors was the better. Especially if your Alhaitham already has good crit stats. Then that 10 CR and 70 CD is not as important. But generally speaking, even if your crit stats are not good, sorry, I shouldn't say not good. Maybe it's good but not OP. Or maybe it's average, good between good and average. I'll think that 3 mirrors is still better, right? And because here's the thing, right? Even if it's 3 mirror without C6 boost, Alhaitham will still do more damage than Yae in that 4 seconds, assuming both of them are equally stacked. Which kind of expected because he is on field, okay? Yae is off field. Always remember, off field damage shouldn't be as high as on field. There has to be a trade-off. Now, however, all of this is the most important thing to take note is that if your Nahida E requires reapplication due to new enemies, then it's better to go for 18 seconds. Especially if you're C2 Nahida. Because if there are new enemies and you don't reapply your E, your C2 Nahida effect will not happen. Put aside the Tri-Karma damage, even the Tri-Karma damage is a bit lost. Like my Nahida right now, I think even when I'm on field, I do like 60k per Tri-Karma. So even if you're off field, you don't get that 250 EM boost, it should still be pretty high. Okay. Oh, and one more point to note about the signature weapon effect of the 28 instances. It's fine for C0 plus. It's about 21 instances used. For C6, 18 seconds is 26 instances used. But for C6, 22 seconds, majority of the last 4 seconds have no weapon effect. And thankfully, because the C6 effect lasts 5 seconds, right? E here does get the C6 effect, so that's good. because the E will also trigger a projection attack. So yeah, I hope what I've laid out here are good points for you to consider between the 22 seconds and 18 seconds, assuming I go in C6. Now just a quick reminder to reapply Nahida E before Alhaitham actions if required here. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the updated number of spreads. Okay, so first off, for the C0 plus, right? C0 to C5, I gotta say that I actually missed something. And this is a very important thing. I missed the fact that E-Rush generates projection attack with his as well. Because the way the talent description is done makes me feel like it's only NACAPA. Because they put it right after the portion where you say, when you do NACAPA, you generate projection mirror. But I guess the aforementioned in the test, when in this portion, right, when attacks of the aforementioned kinds hit opponents, somehow includes the E-Rush damage. Maybe the aforementioned. Yeah, either way, I saw it from gameplay video, it really does generate, so we'll take it that it does. So I have updated the spreads accordingly, so you get one more spread and one more projection attack. And also because we get a projection attack at the very start, right? So luckily, given the multi-hit and free elimination of his NA string, we are still able to get the 2 projection attacks from the normal attacks. So it's like 0 second, you trigger 1, 1.6, and then 3.2. Something like that. If you want to... Okay, so in terms of overall math-wise, right, even without the buffs from the V3, I should have included an additional 2 mirror projection attack plus 1 spread in the math. Which I'll show you guys later. Okay. Let's talk about interesting one, which is the biggest change in this V3, which is the updated spreads for C6. Okay, maybe most folks who won't get C6 will not be interested in this, but I'll still have to cover this because this is part of his entire kit change. Okay. So 3 from Q, 2 from E-Rush for projection attack, 3.2 seconds of 2 mirror gives you 2 spreads from 2 projection attacks. Okay. 2 spreads from the entry itself. CA gives you 1 spread plus 2 from 1 3 mirror projection attacks. And then you have the every 3.2 seconds of 3 mirrors, getting the 2 plus 1 spreads from projection attacks, plus 2 spreads from M5. So effectively, the total for 18 second rotation is actually 17. It's just 17. Because CA kind of do the same role as E in terms of like the timing of the projection attack, and CA wouldn't have any issue with regards to the cooldown. No, you couldn't have the 3 hit rule from the entry because there's a bit of difference between this because of the Q, right? So it's already ready by then, theoretically speaking. Wait, but I think there was some point about it being longer, right? Okay, anyway, it's okay. Maybe at the most it's reduced by 1, but it's still very high, okay? Effectively is still very high because 18 second rotation, 17, 22 second rotation, 24. Actually, I did write down the ICD. Let me double check. Oh, I didn't write down the timing though. I think it's a special one. It's 2 hit ICD and something like 12 seconds. Yeah. If that is the case, then this might be just 1. But it's okay. I don't think I will be updating this. Okay, so it's 17 and 24 here. Both of it has very, very, very high spreads. And the 22 seconds, 7 more spreads in 4 seconds. So it actually makes it worthwhile to use this extended rotation even with your Yae expiring. So I've said again and again, right? But I'm going to repeat this again. Okay, deciding factor of 18 seconds or 20 seconds still depends on Nahida's E re-application and Nahida C0, C1, C0Q. Honestly, you have C6 Alhaitham, I'm going to assume you have C2 Nahida. So you will drop 17.6% DPS increase and Nahida's tri-karma damage if you insist on using the 22 second rotation even when Nahida E application is required. I'll say ultimately I'll look at the combat situation as well. If Alhaitham can clear the remaining enemies in the 22 second E rotation even without Nahida E, C2 or Yae's E, go for it. Because by then you will have done a huge amount of damage. It should be enough, or in most scenarios it should be enough. Okay? ICD, no changes except the portion in red where I just want to mention that the new C1 along with the new C6 actually allows you to use E twice. That's it. Alright, let's talk about updated figures after buff. That's the interesting one. Now, if you are sharp eye, you'll notice that this is higher than what I covered in Math Guide 2 because this is now updated with the one projection attack, once more additional spread from the E trigger, the E rush damage. Okay. But more importantly is the new buffed figure. You see this figure? See this figure? I mean, even this figure is very high. You have something like this 2.366 million. And 1.7 million is still very, very, very high, by the way, even for C6. So DPS wise, this is how it looks like. Now, the 2.36 million doesn't look as exaggerated right now, right? It's only 10 plus K more than the 18 seconds. But the fact that it's 10K plus more than 80 seconds is pretty crazy. Okay, it's pretty crazy. Why this has a typo, but I'm gonna correct it here. So for the sake of comparison, I have done the percentage change here. Okay. No, actually this is wrong. This is this. Okay. So effectively, before C6, you get the 4 to 7% increase from the V3 changes. But C6 has a 24% increase in the 18-second rotation and a 41% increase in the 22-second rotation. It's crazy how much it got buffed, right? And I have not included the C4 buff on the other character too, which C6 unlocks, by the way. Which means if we bring Team DPS in, C6 will have even higher value than this. Now, note that the 4 to 7% increase is already based on the corrected figures for the V2, which means that I've already included the 2 mirror projection attack from E-Rush and its corresponding spread. If I am to compare against the figures that I've shown you guys in Math Guide 2, it's actually a 13 to 17% increase. So it's really good performance for Alhaitham actually. Because basically, he has 50k at C0R1. Yeah? And his C6 is ridiculously good. It's 95k. 90 plus k at C6 is already a good DPS. It's like the typical hyper carry 12 DPS. Some obviously some hyper carry may have some higher DPS at certain stage, whatever the case is. But it's getting there. And this is aggro spread comp. And it's downright OP at C6 because it's 108k. You cross the 100k threshold mark, and in fact it's closer to the 110k threshold. And this is 22 seconds. Okay. Now obviously 22-second rotation is kind of conditional as well, right? It's most useful against bosses or elite enemies that happen to have higher level than you. For example, floor 12 Abyss. Because then you don't need to reapply a Nahida E, you can continue to do the last 4 seconds of the rotation. These figures are also over the entire rotation. Okay, remember this is over the entire rotation. This is not Alhaitham's action window only. Let me be very clear to you guys. It's not his window only. I'm taking over the entire rotation, which means the duration or the setup time from Nahida, from Yae, from Cookie, all is included. So what this means is that if you look at the actual game, when you're doing the actual gameplay to get a feel of the DPS, right, you will see higher figures than this, for sure. Because if I were to include only Alhaitham's duration, then instead of 18 seconds, it will be 11 seconds. Instead of 22 seconds, it will be 15 seconds here. Okay, by the way, my figure have not included C2 Nahida effect. These figures, them looking so good, I still have not included C2 Nahida effect. If I included, it's a 70.6% increase throughout. So C6 22-second rotation with C2 Nahida effect will actually have 127k. Instead of 108k, it's 127k. I mean, what the actual hell, right? It's crazy OP. It's crazy. I mean, he's not a hyper carry comp where one character does almost all of the damage. This is aggro spread. Nahida and Yae are still contributing significant damage too. Even more so with C2 Nahida. So, I don't think people realize how good he is now in V3. The buffs are crazy, especially the C6. But even C0, having 50k DPS at C0 to me is good. Because I have seen cases where it's just 30 plus K, 40K, but this is 50K. Now, finally, while 22 seconds looks OP, I'm gonna repeat this when it comes through this video, okay? 18 or 20 seconds, 22 seconds still depends on what I mentioned earlier in the spread session, okay? And oh, bear in mind, without C1 Nahida, the 41% boost on C6 from the changes will be lower since 250 EM buff is going in the last 4 seconds. But seriously, if you have C6 item, you should have C2 Nahida. Especially if you might watch my video, you know C2 Nahida does give you good value, okay? Okay, so just a quick one. I saw some comments saying that Agra Spread is not its best comp, Quick Bloom is. I just want to clarify this, okay? Quick Bloom is better for F2P. But only if you maintain your Quicken Aura because strong Hydro application will ruin it. Okay, so let's be very clear about this. Quick Bloom, yes, is better for F2P. But when you start to hit the max potential of the characters, i.e. having good artifact stats while still able to hit high EM with EM team buffs, even at C0, Agra Spread is better. So simply put, right, Agra Spread is better, but it requires high investment. Or rather, saying Agra Spread is better when you do have higher required investment on the characters. So we are talking about like good crit stats on Yae, good crit stats on Nahida, good crit stats on Alhaitham. So obviously, I know it's not as F2P friendly, but it is the one with the highest potential, which is why you notice that every time there's Agra Spread, I don't do Quick Bloom. I always do Agra Spread. I don't know whether you guys notice this. Because the gap between Agra Spread and Quick Bloom will also be bigger as you get more Constellation and Signature weapons. Okay? One thing I don't like about Quick Bloom is really sometimes if the Hydro application is too strong, you may have issues. It is possible. Okay? Of course, if you want to argue saying that the DPS can still be high on Quick Bloom, it's still doable. Maybe you drop Cookie for Hydro. Like between Nahida, Yae, and Alhaitham, all of them do a lot of damage actually. Once you hit their max potential, you get more concessions, etc. Okay, they do a lot of damage. If you don't believe me, you can watch my stream anytime. Ask me to use Nahida, Yae, Agra, spread comp before I Ayato install. Once I Ayato install, I can show you with Alhaitham as well. 3 DPS. Triple DPS, man. Alright, Constellation Comparison. I'm reaching the end of this video. So Constellation Comparison, as you can see, right, this is the individual ones. Like I said, C1 is 0% because it's very QL, it's very situational. C2 is only 14%. C3 is 4.2%. C4 is not too bad. It's 10.8%. You have C5 horrible as usual. C6 is 41 and 60. So, like I said, everything is basically on his C6. C0, C2 is just bad. Look at C0, C2. Cumulative is 14%. 14% for worst case scenario. How many pulls is it? 450 pulls. If you have to do soft PT every single pull and you lose every 50-50, it's 450 pulls for 14% increase. That's crazy. It's not worth it at all. C4 is actually better than past few characters C4 by the way. But it's not good enough to pull for. Especially given how bad the earlier constellations are. C6 however is ridiculously good. Right? 41% basically, for reference, right? Yae C6 and Raiden C2 is 43%. Those are still the highest constellation I've seen so far. But now Alhaitham C1 is going to change it, at least in the 22-second rotation scenario. Okay. So like I said, for the cases where you can go 22 seconds, like combat situation against bosses, in enemies, you don't need to reapply Nahida E, you have C1 Nahida, then your C6 will unlock the value of C1, which results in a whopping 60% increase from C5 to C6. 60%. This is definitely the highest C6 value I've ever seen. I have not even included the team buff from C4 that the C6 unlocks as well. But at the same time though, he also has the worst C0 C5. I mean like, that's just horrible. 33% for C0 C5 is crazy. Some of the better characters I see 33% just from C0 to C2. So now he needs 3 more constellations to hit the same value as some other character at C2. Imagine the amount of cost involved here. It's crazy. I don't know why they make it so lopsided. But don't get me wrong, right? I mean, the 22-second rotation is very good because it's more than 100%. Even without the 22-second and 18 seconds, it's close to 90%, so it's still good. And I just want to say one thing. Yae Series 43%, yes, but her earlier Constellation still have more value than Alhaitham because it's more spread. So it's not as heavy as on C6. And her C0 to C6, if I didn't remember, sorry, her C0 to C6, if I didn't remember wrongly, is 126%. So effectively, I can tell you guys, Alhaitham is a very extreme character. C0 or C6, that's it. Don't even go for C2 if you're not intending to get C6, because C2 is horrible. 14% from C0 C2. Why would I spend my pools for that? If you tell me to optimize it in terms of like team comps, etc., that's still doable. But to try to get 2 more of the featured 5-star, just to get 14% increase is not worth it at all compared to all other characters. So yeah, Alhaitham is that extreme. At least his constellations are that extreme. So again, like I said before, should have been moved. This new feature effect should be moved to C1 or C2, not C6. It's too lopsided right now. Alright, with that brings me to the TLDR. I'm going to go fast on this because I know some people just skip to the TLDR anyway. So first off, for details on the latest VG changes and my analysis on them, please refer to the specification. Yeah, I don't want to do a TLDR for this because it doesn't make sense. There's no way I can do a TLDR for this without losing context. Let me put it that way. Okay, so if you really want my analysis on them, please look at the specific section. We'll talk about the updated rotation for C6. These are the 2 rotations. You have an 18-second variant and a 22-second option. Again, refer to the specific section for details because there's quite a bit there, although it's not as long as the Math Guide 2. Energy-wise, no change from Math Guide 2, but I want to address one thing, okay? I saw complaints about me using R5 Siphos on Cookie for Math Guide 2 saying it's view only. So number 1, F2P players can get R5 for 4-star weapons over time. It happens, okay? On my F2P account, I have an R5 for bonus weapon as well. And I understand that Siphos is a new weapon, so it may be tougher to get R5, right? And especially for F2P players. That's perfectly fair. But isn't that why I included Favonius for the energy math? I did. I went to the trouble of including Favonius for the energy math and I still get comments saying that, why are you using R5 Siphos? It's view only. I can't even, man. Seriously. Okay, now, next. You can refer to the important notes and assumptions. Okay, it's pretty much the same as Math Guide 2 except for the point on E being able to be reused. And there's also the Alhaitham main stats and the artifact permutation in Math Guide 2 for the details. Okay, because I'm not going to go through them here again. There's no change at all to the stats and the artifacts. So there's no TLDR. But there's one thing I want to address. I saw some complaints on high crit stats now. It might be only 1 or 2 folks, I understand. But let me just address this, okay? I have never ever changed my permutation before. It has always been 5 rolls combat across total 22 artifact rolls of max possible 25. In other words, I've already included a dose of reality. I'm not like expecting you to get all rolls perfect with all 5 artifacts having 4 base rolls. I'm not. But this is theory crafting. Okay, I still have to target close to max potential. Because it doesn't make sense, right? When you do theory crafting, the whole point of doing theory crafting is to understand how best to optimize and farm for the character, and where the character stands when optimized. Why would I look at mid-level stats? What for? For what? I would much rather look at a target to achieve. Now, for some of the folks who may have given out artifacts already, you say that's unrealistic. Well, I'll give you guys a target to achieve. If you think that you can't hit those artifact stats, then please adjust your expectations accordingly. I know because I did the same for my F2P account as well. Certain artifacts that I know is worthwhile farming months for, I did farm for them. And they did give me good artifacts. I did get good artifacts. I know. I don't get me wrong. I know artifact RNG is a total bitch. Okay? But that doesn't mean that I should somehow go choose to theorycraft average stats. I mean, even for other games, if I do theory crafting, I'll look at optimizing, min-maxing, and highest potential. Or close to highest potential. Not average stats. So I'm sorry, but I will not be doing TC for average stats. It just defeats the purpose to me. To me, the fun of theory crafting is to see how best to optimize and farm for the character. You can be toxic about it, saying that I'm not giving you a realistic permutation, whatever. You know what? I don't care. You know why? Because the whole point of theory crafting, and let me say it again, okay? Whole point of theory crafting is really just to go and optimize and min-max and look at highest potential. Why would I do theory crafting for average stats? It just doesn't make sense to me, okay? So I gotta be very, very honest here, and maybe some people will say that my attitude is bad because of this, but if you watch my other videos, you know that I, generally speaking, do provide a positive attitude. But it's gonna be very straightforward, okay, guys? If you feel that the artifact permutation that I'm doing is unrealistic, you don't want to have a target to achieve, you don't want to look at how the character stands when it's optimized, feel free to look at other channels. Go ahead. I mean, it's your YouTube viewing, right? It's up to you. Just because I'm a small YouTuber doesn't mean I'm gonna bend over backwards to do stuff for some unrealistic. Right, I should say unrealistic. Gee, okay, it is later, but for lack of a better word, very self-entitled request. Because I don't know how best to explain this, okay? Theory crafting is always about how to best optimize and farm for the character, how to get the max potential, how the max potential looks like. I've already done my math such that I split into the C0 to C6, and it give you different weapons as well eventually. So now I even have to go and split out the artifact stats. Seriously? Then what's the fun of farming for the artifacts? What's the point of farming for the artifacts? Just use any random shit artifacts then. Yeah, sorry, I can't even, man. It's ridiculous to me, to be honest, as a theory crafter. But it's okay. You have your view. Go ahead and watch other channels. Yeah. Oh, and for the toxic guy, I can tell you guys, you won't be seeing his comment anymore. Okay. All right. Now that I'm done with that nonsense, let's talk about the latest V3 changes for Alhaitham. Okay, as a TLDR. First off, it's good for Alhaitham. Coupled with the E-Rush triggering projection attack that I missed, his figures are actually now 13 to 17% higher than in Math Guide 2. And if we look at only the V3 changes, C6 is 24% higher at 18 seconds, and a whopping 41% at 22 seconds. So it's like 50k DPS at C0, 95k at C6 18 seconds, 108k at C6 22 seconds. So obviously 50k at C0 R1 is really good. C6 is ridiculously good, and it's OP in the 22-second rotation. Because this is an aggro spread comp, man, not a hyper carry comp. So especially against bosses and elite enemies, because those are scenarios where you do not need to reapply Nahida E, which means you can do the 22-second rotation, and then you will hit the 108k. And these figures are just Alhaitham's figures, okay? It's not the team DPS. It's only Alhaitham's figures. It's over the entire rotation. It's not just over Alhaitham's action window. Which means if you look at the actual gameplay to get a feel of DPS, you will be higher than this. Much higher than this. Oh, and by the way, my figures have not included Cyno Nahida effect yet. If that is included, it's a flat 17.6% increase for the figures you see above. Okay? And what this means is that C6 22-second rotation will have 127k DPS at C6R1. While C0 will have 59k DPS at C0R1. I mean, what the actual hell, right? It's crazy OP. And more importantly, this is not a hyper carry where most of the damage is coming out from one person, one character. This is a grass spread comp where I still have Nahida, Yae contributing significant damage. Even more so with C2 Nahida because C2 Nahida is going to increase all three of them's damage. So now I have an aggro spread comp with Alhaitham, Nahida, Yae contributing a lot of damage each. With the most obviously coming from the on-field character Alhaitham in this case. But you see where I'm trying to get to here? It's a good comp because there's multiple DPS involved. But like I said earlier, when I compare Quick Bloom and the aggro spread definitely does require high investment. That's true. So I don't think people realize how good he is now in the V3 because seeing as there was so much nerfs in V2, everyone's impression is like he's been nerfed to Oblivion, right? But even in the V2 version when I did the Math Guide 2, I didn't think that he was nerfed to Oblivion. I think he's still okay, he's still good. Now he's even better. Okay? Now lastly, whether you use C6 18 seconds or 22 seconds really depends on a few factors. One, whether Nahida E is reapplication. Obviously against bosses and elite enemies with higher levels than you shouldn't need to reapply. Then you can use the 22 second. And also whether you have C1 Nahida. Because if you don't have C1 Nahida, the Q will have expired in the last 4 seconds or 22 seconds. Okay? Likewise for the weapon effect. That will happen as well. But the weapon effect is not that bad. Losing the weapon effect because it's flat damage bonus. And also I think if you get C6 item, you should have like C1 or C2 Nahida. I'm assuming. Okay? Don't quote me. Alright, last one. Constellation Comparison. C0, C2 is bad. It's almost half of what a typical C0, C2 would be. C4 is actually better than past few new characters. C4, but not great enough. Because the earlier constellations are all bad. C0, C1. Sorry. C1, C2, C3 are all bad. So it's not worth it for the C4. And C6 is ridiculously good. 41% in the 18 second, 60% in the 22 second. And this 60% can be realized if you have C1 Nahida and Nahida's E does not need to be reapplied. Okay? Again, repeating again, right? But I really want to drill into people's mind. Okay? I'm saying okay a lot as well because that's what happens when I start to get really thirsty. The reason why C6 gets even more value with a longer rotation is partly due to unlocking C1's value. It is only in the C6 rotation that you can effectively use a second E action window, which also means one more projection attack plus spreads on the E rush and projection attacks. On the E rush actually, but okay, never mind. So if you try to do it without C6 effect, the damage will drop drastically because the 8 second of 3 mirror becomes 4 second of 1 mirror plus 4 second of 2 mirror. Yeah, in case somehow you want to do the C6 rotation without actually having C6, it's not a good idea. Alright? Especially when you saw how bad the 1 mirror damage is now. And I've not even included the value to the team DPS on C6 unlocking C4 in my figures. And basically, to conclude, Alhaitham is a very extreme character. You either go C0 or C6. Kinda like Ayato, but at least his overall C0, C6 is still higher than Ayato. Anything else in between is not worth it at all. Okay, so like, if you accidentally got, say, C0 plus C1 in like 10 pulls, right? Don't pull further. Don't fall into the trap of trying to get a C2. That's not good. Because C0, C5 is a very, very pathetic 33%. This is one of the worst C0, C5 I've ever seen so far, ever done math for so far. So C0, C5 super terrible, and then you have a very, very strong C6 that then brings his overall C0, C6 to be better than some characters. Which is crazy if you think about it. I don't know what Hoyoverse is doing here. This is one of the most unbalanced or imbalanced constellations I've seen. Alright, anyway, that brings me to the end of this video. I ended up talking more than I should have because I had to address previous math guides complaints. So in terms of what's coming next, I don't know whether people are still interested in the quicksort role with all these changes heavily focused on the 3 mirror projection buffs. If yes, then let me know in comments. If there's a lot of folks who want it, then I'll consider doing a quicksort role before I move on to weapon comparison. Alright? I'm actually very curious for the Miss Splitter. Like how Miss Splitter will fare against his signature weapon. Interesting to think about. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's all for this video. In fact, although I will do a Constellation and Refinement comparison when the banner is out, right? One that is more focused on the cost-benefit analysis. I hope that the Constellation comparison here already gives you a very good idea about his constellations and what to pull for. It's very straightforward. Either C0 or C6. That's it. Alright, thanks everyone for watching. I hope this content has been helpful. If you like the content, remember the video and click subscribe for more. And yeah, bye.